After a succession of poorly received tie-ins in the late 90s, South Park's odyssey into video games took an extended hiatus during the 2000s. Series creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker grew protective of the license, and so began a 9-year gap between games. In their absence, video game adaptations of similar animated shows were in ample supply, with some even attaining considerable success. Taking notice of this trend, it was in late 2004 that Ubisoft attempted to reacquaint South Park with the medium. This project was led by two Ubisoft producers and was simply being called South Park internally. Since many of their own studios were already busy with work on other titles, the publisher opted to have a third party develop it. This was the little-known BuzzMonkey Software based in Eugene, Oregon. A slightly obscure choice, the company was apparently chosen after having presented a couple of demos for potential games to them. Ubisoft's management had declined these, but was impressed with the studio's technical ability and therefore handed them the contract to South Park before long. With Ubisoft's producers installed to oversee it, BuzzMonkey got to work in December of 2004. This was around the time that Season 8 of the show was coming to an end, with the last episode, Woodland Critter Christmas, airing on December 17th. One former developer of BuzzMonkey shared that a part of its initial mission statement was to make the first game ever to map out the entire town of South Park, almost a decade before South Park's Stick of Truth would later come along to claim this landmark. A variety of playable characters were planned to be on offer too. There was going to be the four boys, Stan, Kyle, Cartman and Kenny, as well as a number of secondary characters. This included Chef, Gerald Broflovsky, Randy Marsh, Mr. Slave, Towley and others. Vehicles were readily available, easily found and commandeered, not unlike the mechanics of Grand Theft Auto. The fully realised open world was only one side to it, however. What BuzzMonkey was actually attempting to bring to life was something slightly less like The Simpsons Hit and Run and more like a traditional adventure game at its heart. The intention was for it to have a focus on puzzle solving and environmental gags that players would stumble upon as they wander about. Ubisoft had originally told the team to very directly mimic the style of Hit and Run, but they ended up putting their own spin on the formula, which they felt better captured the essence of the TV series. The PlayStation 2 was the game's lead platform, but it was also being worked on for Xbox, with a GameCube release being planned as well. The publisher gave them a fairly constrained period of time in which to put together the vertical slice shown here, although it was already starting to form into the vast, detail-rich world filled with Easter eggs and hidden jokes that they were aiming for. From what we understand, the game's story would have adopted a fairly straightforward linear mission structure, the first of which, contained within this early prototype build, put players in control of Eric Cartman, who is trying to obtain a straitjacket. To do so, he must infiltrate South Park's psychiatric hospital. During this mission, players must first gain a disguise. This alternate costume in itself would have been a throwback to an episode from South Park Season 8 called Up the Down Steroid. The episode saw Cartman entering a Special Olympics event for children with disabilities, pretending to be disabled in order to compete and win a prize of $1,000.
I want to be in the Special Olympics.
He dons a homemade outfit, including a bicycle helmet, in an ill-conceived attempt to mimic his competitors. In this level of the game, players were required to navigate Cartman's house to assemble this costume, and while they did, a licensed track, Let's Get Retarded by the Black Eyed Peas, would play in the background. When ready, Cartman would then make his way to what was referred to in-game as the South Park Mental House. Inside, the player searches for a straitjacket before a cutscene is triggered. Mistaking him for one of the actual patients, the doctors restrain him and undergo electroshock therapy on him. This, however, has unintended side effects, as it reawakens his long-dormant V-chip, in yet another reference to a previous South Park story. In the movie South Park Bigger, Longer and Uncut, Cartman receives a cranial implant that electrocutes him every time he utters a profanity. As the film goes on, the chip malfunctions, granting him the ability to fire bolts of lightning from his fingertips. When the doctors force him into having this treatment, this ability inexplicably returns, allowing him to make his escape after fighting off the hospital staff.
You're going nowhere, little piggy. The door's locked, and I have the key.
It's at this point that we are introduced to the game's combat system, a fairly basic repertoire of punches and kicks, as well as a ground pound move for Cartman. This is just one example of missions that were on the table, representing some of the humour and blends of different gameplay types like driving, fighting, and collectible hunting that were to be expected in the finished game. The story cinematics were said to be pre-rendered CGI, made in-house at BuzzMonkey. The voice acting used for them, a developer explained, was not in fact provided by showrunners Matt and Trey themselves, although other members of the show's official cast had apparently filled in for them. It's possible that the duo's involvement might have increased if the project had continued, but their interaction with the game was next to non-existent. A former designer believed that they were distantly made aware of its development, although they had no input on any creative level. Outside of the single-player component, BuzzMonkey was also hoping to develop a robust split-screen multiplayer suite. Some of their ideas included modes for racing, as well as the tentatively dubbed Snowball Wars, Cops and Robbers, and Mailbox Baseball. These were simply rough concepts, however, as the focal point of development was very much fixed on that solo experience. South Park was the company's most ambitious title by quite a margin. For a game of its time, the overworld, for instance, was shaping up to be relatively huge. It was worked on for a total of 10 months, before, in a somewhat sudden twist, it was cancelled. At the time, a large amount of progress had been made towards crafting the town and trying to make it as true to the show as possible. The Xbox build you see here, obtained by Andrew Bowman of Past to Present Online, is only an early glimpse of what was finished, dating back to March 2005. The project came to a close in August. Former employees of the developer provided some insight into the circumstances around its abrupt collapse. One ex-artist believed that the root cause of its termination was the actions of one individual in particular, one of the game's two producers. Multiple developers formerly of BuzzMonkey claim that this Ubisoft staffer, who had never previously held a producer position, exhibited strange and unprofessional behaviour for the duration of the project. Some describe this person as being rude and temperamental towards members of the team, with one or two of them suggesting this might have been the reason why Ubisoft stepped in and shut it down. This theory is supported by the fact that this individual was fired from the publisher within the subsequent months. Another source, a designer who had a major role in the game's development, believes this issue was only the tip of the iceberg. Ubisoft's schedule for the title had been tight to say the least, pushing the team to its limits. This, coupled with the enormous amount of work still left to be done, made for a difficult situation. For many of the developers on board, this was their first project, so lack of experience, let alone with AAA titles, was another obstacle to factor in. All of these problems, in addition to how late it was being made in the generation, ultimately rendered it unfeasible in the eyes of Ubisoft. By the end, it had never officially left pre-production. BuzzMonkey's South Park prototype ran on an engine of their own creation, which was intended to be utilised by multiple original projects in the future. In the aftermath of its cancellation, the developers attempted to form other, smaller games using it. Among these was a platformer named Cave Girl and a tech demo for a game based around the 2006 movie Happy Feet. When none of these were picked up by publishers, BuzzMonkey took a new direction to sustain itself, working on ports for a handful of well-known franchises, including Tomb Raider. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe for more, and if you'd like to discover more console games, you can check them out over on my channel by hitting one of the annotations. There's a video on a Lost Kid Icarus game featuring an adult version of Pit, as well as one about Rayman 4, a scrapped 3D platformer with a very unusual story. Thank you for watching, and please enjoy.